we're going to talk about that subject this morning, and it still flows in our what we're talking about, our authority as believers in prayer. And I'll reiterate something I said way back at the beginning. If our God is the only true God, he reigns supreme, all power in heaven and earth has been given to us through the covenant that Jesus established. And we could go on talking, just listing that. But if that's all true, why are Christians so powerless? Why are we such weaklings when it comes to things of faith, to things of life, to organizing our life, running our life, making a plan, being disciplined? Why are Christians so weak, so powerless? Part of it is I don't think we understand our authority, nor do we know how to operate in it. So that's what we've been talking about, dealing with prayer. Now, this particular subject fits in with it, and I've been sitting on this, waiting for this time to address this, because it not only deals with what we're dealing with now, it's going to deal heavily with the future. Yeah. So let me remind you, we spent over a year talking about fear and why we are never to be afraid of anything as a Christian. You've all accomplished that, right? I know it's a work in progress. But I don't want to freak anybody out this morning by what I'm going to present, but I am not going to sugarcoat it. Because when the time comes, we need to operate in our faith and in our authority. If all we did was sugarcoat it, nobody will be ready to operate in their faith and in their authority. That's right. So let's talk about what's real right now, what's real of what's coming, and apply it to, we can't go into the last days, we can't go into these end times as weakling Christians. We're going to get taken out if we do. So we plain need to address the subject and begin focusing on it before we get there. The old saying, we need to put our fire suit on now so that when the fire breaks out, we're ready. It's once things start going bad, what was that message? Let's see if we can call pastor, see if we can listen to that message. You're too late. It's already burning. You're going to get burnt. This is a preparation thing that needs to take place inside of us. So that's the application to what we're talking about here. I've been messing with this in my mind. I think I talked to Matt two and a half months ago about it already, saying, I know I have to address this. I don't want to come off like some wild-eyed conspiracy theorist. But in my gut, I just know there's stuff here we as Christians need to, if nothing else, be aware of. And wake up and pay attention to, because it's the beginning of where it's going. And I think we're far enough along in the series on our authority that I can touch it. And last weekend, Tom hit some things that I went, yep, I'm going to have to touch this now. Now it feels right. So we're going to take a little bit of a detour in what we're talking about in our authority and make some application this morning. And I'm going to jump right off of what Tom said last weekend. Right at the end, he used that scripture and was talking about that concept through his message of how in the Old Testament, when Aaron threw his rod down, the other magicians threw their rods down and they all became snakes or serpents, but Aaron's rod swallowed up their rods. And his application was this: in the last days, what we're facing, we have got to understand we have a rod, we have supernatural ability and power, and if we will operate in it correctly, it will eat up the other supernatural stuff that's trying to come against us. Correct. We have to recognize that. So with that in concept in mind, here's what we're going to talk about this morning. We're going to hit those 6 things, 5 specifically, but 6 in a little bit more in depth than some, and just kind of bounce over some others. The COVID-19 and the variants, like the Delta variant, the COVID vaccine, specifically if you've been vaccinated, future COVID variants and other possible releases, what Tom Scarella said last weekend about mosquitoes, population reduction, and then he's got free speech infringement there. I just had other aggravating things on my notes, and evidently he didn't like that, so he put that up. So that's all right. So let's talk a little bit about who we are and what we're supposed to operate like. Psalms 91, surely he will save you from the fowler's snare. A fowler is a person who catches birds, and they used to do it with snares back in that culture. And it's a word picture for if there is a snare set for you someplace in life, God will save you from that. And from the deadly pestilence. Pestilence is big because it talks about something that is a destroyer. It's a plague. It comes from that Hebrew word. There's the definition for it. And let me say right away that all this stuff that is here, the articles we're going to show, the couple videos, it's all online with today's message. You have access to it all. You can click on the PowerPoint and go right to these screens and look at it on your device at home or wherever. And for those of you following us that way, welcome, good morning. Thank you for joining us via live stream. In the summer, we have more of you than in the winter because some of our own people are watching by live stream this morning. And thank you for joining us. But again, same information. You can catch everything on your device. The PowerPoint is there. Just go to the website to today's message and you'll find it. So if you go a little bit deeper into Psalms 91, you will not fear. That, in my opinion, there should have been a comma, there should have been a period, there should have been something there. You will not fear. Because we tend to skip over you will not fear to see what we're not supposed to be afraid of. You will not fear the terror of night. Oh, I'm supposed to be okay at night. No, you're not supposed to fear, period. One thing you're not supposed to fear is the terror of night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, nor the plague that destroys at midday. Again, talking about pestilence and plague. And these things are not new to the human race. They've been around a long time. But they're going to be a big key factor in the last days. So there is definitions on pestilence, plague. The plague in the King James is the destruction that wasteth, is what they translated plague in the NIV or the New King James. So you've got pestilence. There's the definition for it. There's the definition for plague. And you got to tie destruction and wasteth together. So it's something that gets on you and just kind of, a wasting disease is something that just kind of consumes you and eats you and takes your strength away and you die. It's a pestilence. It's a plague. Its purpose is to kill us, to devastate us, like the middle one there, to cut us off, meaning when you cut someone off, their life off, they're dead. Ruin them, destroy them. So even in Psalms 91, we're warned about it, but we're warned about it in such a way of verse 1, he who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, he is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. And then he goes on and talks about pestilence and plague, and you don't have to fear this stuff. So why in the world is the church as weak in facing this COVID-19 thing as the rest of the world? What is wrong with us? Oh, we serve Almighty God. He can do anything. Then act like it. Truth of the matter is, I think sometimes it's just empty words. We don't really believe it. We say it, but we don't really believe it. And when the challenge hits us, we're standing there freaking out like everybody else because what we believe is what really comes up at those times. So let's talk about last days a bit here. Luke chapter 21. Then he said to them, nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be great earthquakes, famines, pestilences in various places, and fearful events and great signs from heaven. Read a little, so that's pretty intense right there, including the pestilence thing. Read on. You will be betrayed even by parents, brothers, relatives, and friends, and they will put some of you to death. Now, until this COVID-19 thing, I I really wondered, what is it going to take to get a friend or a parent or a relative to betray you? No, I don't wonder anymore. It's like, serious? We get so afraid that we're willing to basically do whatever it takes to try to protect ourselves, including the concept of turning people in. Last year, there it was, right in our face. With something that you have an approximate 99% chance of survival if you're under age 65. I mean, you talk about a minor thing. But we got so hyped up by the media, so hyped up by what they were trying to accomplish and get us going in fear, that until it got shot down, there were some cities and some states who were saying, if you know someone who's got this and they're not quarantined, call the authorities. And then finally they shut it down and said, no, we're not. This is America. We're not doing this. But the day's coming, they will do this. Jesus goes on and says, all men will hate you because of me. Not a hair of your head will perish. How? By standing firm, you will gain life. So all these bad things are happening. He's talking about in Luke 21. He says, but you don't even have to lose one hair off your head if you will stand firm on this thing. Well, that's what we're talking about now. We've got to see what's coming, know what's coming, and learn how to stand firm on it. Understand our authority, not give in to fear, and learn how to pray with authority. Here is the warning Jesus gave, a little deeper in the chapter. Be careful, or your hearts will be weighed down with dissipation, drunkenness, and the anxieties of life, and that day will close on you unexpectedly like a trap. So he's saying, don't go to sleep at the sweat chair. Stay awake. And we'll take these apart and explain what they mean. But his basic thought is, don't go into denial. This stuff is coming. Be ready for it. Or it's going to come on you like a trap, and then you'll be caught. For it will come upon all those who live on the face of the whole earth. So this is a worldwide thing. Be always on the watch and pray that you may be able to escape all that is about to happen, and that you will be able to stand before the Son of Man. Now, verse 36, a lot of pre-tribulation rapture people use that as an escaping verse. Well, I know all this bad stuff's going to happen, but see, Jesus said right there, if we watch and pray, we'll escape. He didn't say he's going to take you out of the earth. He didn't say that there. He said you can escape what's happening. Do you know you can escape car accidents not by leaving the earth, just by using your head when you drive? To escape something, you don't have to be raptured out of the world. You just need to know how to confront it and deal with it. I've had, and hopefully we can have some of the people share some of their stories of how they pray with authority on things and how that things have come against various people. I don't want to take anybody's thunder, but they say they recognize it and they immediately address it and they escape it. It doesn't get on them. See, by standing firm, he said earlier, we can escape things. The very hair on our head don't even have to be touched. But verse 34, stay awake, be ready, be prepared, be watching. The King James Version reads it a little bit differently, and my next notes are tied to the King James. In verse 34, instead of anxieties of life, it uses the word cares of this life. So the next PowerPoint I bring up is going to use the word cares or define the word cares. It's that word anxieties there. So here's what that word anxieties or care means. In Webster, it means suffering of mind and grief, be disquieted state, of mixed uncertainty, apprehension, mixed responsibility, painstaking or watchful attention. Okay, make the application. In the last year, do you think anybody was suffering from anxiety of life concerning COVID? Just look at the definition. Disquieted state of mixed uncertainty, apprehension, not responsibility, apprehension of what am I responsible for? Maybe I should just stay home and take care of myself and make sure nobody gives me anything I don't want. Painstaking and watchful attention, suffering of mind. Suffering of mind can be many things, but it can also include fear and that whole realm. So Jesus said, be careful. You don't let your hearts get weighed down by three things. We'll go to those next. The day close on you unexpectedly. We're looking at anxieties or the cares of life. Okay? So there is that definition. Now let's go to the next thing he mentioned, or the first thing, weighed down with dissipation. Then we'll go to drunkenness, and we just briefly looked at the word cares, but I'm going to go a little deeper into that. So there's care. Here is dissipation. To waste, squander, or dispense. How do you do that? Indulgence in pleasure to the point of self-harm. So now tie all that definition together. You're wasting, you're squandering because you're so indulged in pleasure, it's actually hurting you. Well, you're wasting and squandering what? Whatever you're supposed to be doing or who you are. You're more interested in pleasure. And then dissipation, the other definition is headache from drunkenness. Drunkenness, an intoxicant or intoxication. Now, typically we look at alcohol as being the thing we get drunk on. You can be drunk from all kinds of things in life. Intoxicated. If you look up the word intoxicated, it means to be under the influence to where it is controlling you. Now, alcohol can do that. Drugs can do that. There's all kinds of things that can do that. There's people who struggle going to work or having a decent job because they are so intoxicated with video games. They're under its influence, and they're not going to give it up. Right? That is a problem today. You can put many things there, but he called it dissipation. You're squandering who you are and who you're designed to be, and it's usually tied into you're so focused on pleasure of some kind, including intoxication. And cares means solicitude. So what does that word mean? There's the definition for that. Concern that someone feels about concern that someone feels about someone's health, happiness, etc. So you're concerned about your health, your happiness, etc. Relating to the present existence. So you're very concerned. Jesus said, watch yourself. You don't get too concerned about your own health and happiness relating to your current existence. So now let's go back and put it in the scripture. Jesus says, be careful, or your hearts, that's where everything comes from, a wellspring of life, will be weighed down with dissipation. What was dissipation? Nutshell definition of that? Indulging in the pleasures of life to the point of self-harm. In other words, I don't have time to do something when I'm not working my 8-hour job. I mean, I know we could do some things to get ahead financially, but there's this series that on TV I'm into, or this book series, or what. It just seems like there's always things where you're so focused on making yourself feel good, you're harming yourself. Christians do that. I don't know how we can get ahead financially. Well, maybe quit sitting on the couch and get a second job. Pick up a business. Oh, Pastor, I thought God would just give it to me. Well, you thought wrong. Why are we such weak Christians? God will bless you and prosper you in what you're doing, but you gotta do something. Well, I work 8 hours and then I go home and do nothing. There's your problem. And your life is reflecting that. That's for somebody. I don't know who that's for, but that's for somebody. Indulge in pleasure to the point of self-harm, dissipation, drunkenness, being intoxicated by something. I mean, you're controlled by something. Again, it's tied to pleasure, and it just kind of overwhelms you, and it's this is what I do, and I know it's costing me things, but this is what I do. And the anxieties of life or the worries of this present existence. You know what people do when they get afraid or worried? They try to get their mind off the subject by doing something to make themselves feel good, dissipation and drunkenness. Jesus warned us about that. He said, there's going to be some tough times coming. Don't take the normal human route of dissipation. I'm going to do something to just make myself feel good and this, that, and to the point of self-harm. There's the key. We can do things to make ourselves feel good, but to the point of self-harm. Drunkenness is under dissipation. Drunkenness or intoxication stands by itself. Now, here's a side thought. I find it interesting. The further we get into the last days or closer we're getting into this, the more acceptable drinking has become in the church. Isn't that odd? 30, 40 years ago, drinking was not accepted in the church. When David Wilkerson had his first vision in the 70s, and he stated the time is coming when drinking will be accepted among Christians, the people thought he was nuts. They called him a false prophet. Here we are. What did Jesus warn about? Be careful in the last days. You're going to be afraid, you're going to be nervous, you're going to be anxious, and rather than stepping into your authority, standing in faith, you're going to run to something to make yourself feel good. Ooh. Isn't that interesting? So, when it comes to the anxieties of life or our present existence, he says, watch, this is the trap. Because the trouble is going to come on the whole earth. Verse 36, you need to see it coming. You need to watch, you need to pray, you need to be in a stance where you can escape this. Okay? So there's the scriptural layout for what's coming. So let me get back up to where I was. I'll jump through these. So here's the first one we want to talk about. The COVID-19 and the variants. Okay, so now here's a fact. If this virus acts anything like other viruses or the flu, we will never get it off the face of the earth. It is here now until time ends. You can't exterminate it. It's here. And if it acts anything like viruses act, it will mutate. Like the Delta variant. We're going to have this going on the rest of our lives. This thing's going to be mutating. This thing's here. It's going to try to find a way in. And if this path doesn't work, it changes itself and goes this way. It's how viruses work. This is no different. We need to be ready for that in our faith. Because the media is trying to give the illusion that if everybody would get vaccinated, COVID-19 would go away. It's a virus. It's never going away. We're the ones who have to become strong in standing against it and whatever variants come down the pike. By faith. Well, everybody has to get it. Really? Really? I don't think that's scriptural. We don't have to get it. Well, I don't know if I believe that. Well, get ready then, because you're probably going to get it. You know, the way you measure it, it's going to be measured back to you. Well, I just hope I'm not going to get really sick. See, there's a weak, pitiful Christian talking. You will decide how sick you get. You decide that today or last year or whenever. By taking a stand in your authority and speaking, declaring, confessing, praying accordingly. There's Christians who are sick and are dying. I know. But then there's Christians who've come through this COVID-19 thing, not a hair of their head was even touched. It was like a non-event. This type of thing is going to go on for as long as we live on this earth. And this notion of if we could just get everybody vaccinated, it would go away, is a ploy they're playing for a bigger picture. Because they're all scientists, they're not that dumb. They know what they're doing. So now we got to talk about a difficult one, the vaccine. Whether you've been vaccinated or not. Okay, if you haven't been vaccinated, you need to have your faith turned on so that this thing doesn't affect you. If you want immunity to it, you just come from the perspective it'll go through me and it's going to be a non-event. If you want to set your faith for, I'll never get it. It'll never touch me. You can set your faith for that too. But whatever, if you haven't been vaccinated, you better set your faith, not just be rolling the dice. Right? Okay, just making sure you're still awake. If you have been vaccinated, I'm going to start with a thing here that is really shocking and then kind of move more to some information that I really trust. But if you have been vaccinated, you need to set your faith now that the things that they're saying could happen to you because of this experimental vaccine don't happen to you. See, the scripture talks about if we're a believer, if we drink any deadly thing, it won't hurt us. You say, well, that's not a shot. Well, they didn't have shots back then. It's talking about getting some deadly thing into your body. Now, granted, we don't go walking around drinking poison just to prove that verse. But there's Christians who've taken this shot, not realizing this could have bad effects down the road. Now is the time to turn your faith on to prevent the bad effects down the road. Now is the time to pray with authority. Because there's too many people who know, way more than I know, who are saying this could develop into some huge problems. Well, we as Christians have an edge. We can get in front of that if we don't play the weak Christian card. We got to gird up. We got to step up and become serious about some of the things going on around us. Give me that first article, and he's going to have to do some switching back and forth. This one is really, and all we need is the headline. Can you slide it so we can read it? This is a French scientist who said everybody vaccinated by COVID-19 will die. If you read on, it says, that's not news. Everybody who's born on earth will die. It's like, well, give me something important. If you read on in there, it says within 2 years is his estimate. Well, that's dramatic. Okay, go to the next one. Horrifying study reveals mRNA vaccine nanoparticles are circulated throughout the entire body, not just localized, brain, heart, liver, ovaries, testes, and more. And they go and explain that. So give me the last one. That's important because of a video we're going to watch a piece of. 5 doctors agree that COVID-19 injections are bioweapons and discuss what to do about it. So now either these people are all harebrains, just wild-eyed conspiracy fanatics, or they know something about this vaccine we don't. If you've been vaccinated, I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to wake you up and say, don't act like what the government's telling you is true. Because there's too many people saying it's not. Well, I did it. That's okay. But now it's time to get the fire suit on and to put this together. So there's going to be a couple of videos that are going to be linked. We're going to watch about 8 minutes of one. Now it starts out, these are segments taken out of a long presentation. And it starts out with 3 guys sitting there talking about a graph. The 3 guys sitting there, their names will come up later, but the guy on the left with the white hair is the inventor of the mRNA vaccine. not how it's applied to COVID. He invented the concept of an mRNA vaccine. He invented the vaccine, and then they took it and applied it to COVID. The scientists did. He, as the inventor of it, should have some authority in what he's saying about it. You think? Yep. So they're discussing this and some concerns he has. So we're going to watch, it's like 6.5 minutes, and we're going to jump and just catch the end. And I want you to hear from the inventor of this and a biologist who's sitting there with him, and another guy who, I don't remember, he works with the government and Senate, and he's like a liaison, trying to get some of this information to the powers that be. And he won't say it, I don't think, in this video, but in the other one, he talks about how the government just plain shuts him down. They don't want to hear it. They won't. He says, please get this information to President Biden. No, he's too busy. Well, get it to one of the top people's staffers or whatever. And he just keeps sharing how they just keep shutting it down. They don't want to hear any science other than what they're saying is science. So anyway, let's watch a little bit of this video. These guys are extremely reputable in that we have the inventor of this type of vaccine sitting here talking to us. So let's start that in.
Byram Brittle did a freedom of action request of the Japanese government for the Pfizer data, and he got a biodistribution chart. And I'm pretty sure I linked to the original data in my paper. And this graph was created from that Pfizer data. So this is not the Pfizer data itself from the Pfizer study. This is a graph, and people have double-checked and triple-checked this.
Yeah, it's a summary graphic.
It's a summary graph so that you can see it visually.
I did review the primary data, and I concur that the primary data is consistent with the graph that you have nicely summarized.
Right. And so what you see from this graph is that when you inject in the shoulder, these...
Do you want to walk through teach the listener how it shows that?
How it shows what?
What you're just saying.
So yeah, some people will just listen to this. So what we're looking at is a graph of different lines of concentration of spike protein in various tissues. No.
Yes, it's a lipid nanoparticle.
Oh, it's the lipid nanoparticle, which is the delivery mechanism.
Right. It's like the Fed.
It is the drug.
Well, for people at home, it's the box. It's the box in which the mRNA...
It's a proxy for the drug. So the mRNA is what causes the manufacture of the spike protein. But if you find the lipid nanoparticles, that tells you that your drug got to this location.
Right. It's the delivery box, effectively. It's the FedEx delivery box that has the mRNA inside.
This is, you're exactly right. This is the lipid component.
Yeah.
That does the delivery.
Okay, so good. So what we've got here are different lines that tell you over time from a quarter of an hour to 48 hours where you find what the concentration in various tissues are. And you've got some strong signals here. You've got it in whole blood, not surprisingly, over the first 4 hours. In other words, it's moving around, it's circulating.
That in and of itself is unusual.
And concerning.
Right, it should be in the interstitial fluid.
So the forgive me, just to get a little more precise, we've administered by needle into the deltoid of this complex.
Yeah.
And you're just tracking the lipid part of it now. There's also an RNA part of it. But as you say, it quickly moves into the blood. Plasma is the cell-free fraction. That's the yellow mustard line. And the gray line is whole blood. So that includes the cellular part of blood.
Yeah.
Okay. Carry on.
Okay. And then we get lines that rise. So all of these things decline as basically this diffuses through the body, which actually is not what you would hope. You would hope it would stay in the arm, but it's basically diffusing through the body. So concentrations are dropping as it gets more and more evenly distributed. And then concentrations are rising conspicuously in two places as we close in on 48 hours. One of them is in the ovaries, where it goes sky high. That's really frightening.
Anybody that's looked at this data says, what?
Yeah, that is a very frightening signal.
And it's the cognitive dissonance between what the CDC says is that this is safe for pregnant women.
Right.
This is perfectly safe, and it's on the CDC website. It's
It's
unbelievable.
great. At some level, it's not safe for women at all. I mean, this is
Right.
this is
Right.
dangerous.
Right. It's not just pregnant women. It's not just pregnant
before we
women. Right.
interpret the data, let's
Right.
make sure your listeners understand it.
Okay, so the ovaries show a high concentration. For whatever reason, it's ending up in the ovaries
Of the
preferentially. Yes, the lipid is ending up there. And then the other place that we have a signal, which I think suggests something we need to worry farther down the road. You tell me, Robert, if I'm on the right track here or not. But the fact that it shows up concentrating in bone marrow,
Bad news.
actually, that suggests that you could end up with, now, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but I'm saying we need to look for something like leukemias showing up here because of their creation in bone marrow. I know from other work that it also seems to show up preferentially in lymph nodes, which raises the question of whether or not lymphomas might be created. In any case, these are possible long-term effects that we have no way of knowing don't arise because these things have not been injected into people for more than a year.
So we have two adverse event signals that are starting to become apparent. My friends at the FDA tell me
Okay.
that are relevant to what you're saying.
Okay.
You're focusing on bone marrow.
Mm-hmm.
So typically aplastic anemia, leukemia, lymphoma, those kinds of things might, if there is going to be a signal, we might see it 6 months, 3 years, 9 years. Okay, hard to tell, because this is a progression of cancer that often requires multiple mutations.
Yep.
Okay, so let's just park that.
Yep.
It is
But
a
you
risk.
said-
it is a risk that should be monitored.
Well, wait a second.
Well-
you said somebody is beginning to see a signal of something, but I didn't get what it was.
Yeah, so I was going to get into that.
Okay.
There's two signals that are starting to, and we don't have time to go into the nuance of how come it takes so long for them to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
Okay. But one of them is thrombocytopenia. That's not having the platelets.
Okay.
Okay.
Which are manufactured in the bone marrow.
Which are so right now we're focusing on bone marrow signals. Okay. Thrombocytopenia is one of them. Another one that is very hard to understand that's starting to come up in the database is reactivation of latent viruses.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this
Herpes
is
zoster.
shingles. Shingles is an example of that, but there are many others, and there's something in the literature about reactivation of latent human retroviruses. Okay, so it is there are anomalous findings cropping up, and I concur that it was when I received these data to evaluate. I gave you that whole story. Okay. Those are two of the things. And by the way, what's really odd to me about the ovarian signal is there's no signal in the testis.
Right. It's very low.
And a colleague of mine, Dr. Kevin Tamara, has done a lot of thinking and reading about that because it bothers him too. He's a urologist, so he kind of specializes in the male reproductive system. And he has some theories having to do with charge associated, because these are charged lipids. So there are particular features of the ovary that may, and as opposed to the testis, that may explain some of this, but it doesn't get us away from the two core things. Number one, this was known with the original data packages. The Japanese data package is essentially a historic document. It's different from what the FDA is currently looking at. So these data have been out there a long time. And yes, we have a whole lot of messaging.
But not in public view.
Within the purview, the confidential,
Of the regulators.
protected, not
This
disclosed
is
purview.
and this is company confidential.
Of the regulators
You
across.
can pause it there. Jump it ahead to 8. They talk about the fact that in behind the scenes, other countries had knowledge of all this stuff, and our country either ignored it or whatever. It didn't get brought out like it should. So now we're going to go to the last couple minutes where they kind of just summarize everything they've been talking about.
Implications in the bone marrow. We've got potential long-term implications in the bone marrow. We have short-term implications in the ovaries. We've got potential long-term implications. I would add to the list what I've been worried about most from the beginning are autoimmune disorders that might show up in the long term. Is that plausible as you see it?
We talked about this earlier, and for me, It's less the lipid component, although that certainly has merit for autoimmune. It's more the circulating free spike protein, which we didn't expect in the literature. And we were the developers assured us this would not happen. The literature suggested we would not have free spike. And then Harvard and Brigham did a study in nurses, and lo and behold, we clearly have free spike after vaccination. And that has a whole other set of implications. But development of autoimmune disease against complexes of foreign protein plus normal human proteins is certainly something that you'd have to monitor for. As we were discussing,
Can you pause
the
it
way
right
that
there?
that's
So the guy on the left in the white shirt with the white hair, he's the inventor of the mRNA vaccine technology. Not the COVID shot, but the technology of the mRNA. The guy in the middle is a biologist, and the guy on the right I was talking about, he's the one who works with government back and forth, and I don't know what his scientific credentials are, but he's obviously very educated and very smart. The guy on the left is the one who actually, out of the three, to me, has the most credibility. It's like the guy who invented the car. He should know a little bit if it's not running right or if it's off or whatever. He's the one that I am paying the most attention to. But go ahead and run it.
part of the reason why you typically want a 2 to 3 year follow-up period on the initial group of phase 3 patients to make sure that autoimmune consequences don't develop, because they typically take time.
Right, and this is why, you know, they always say that there's no such thing as a vaccine that is developed fast. You know, like the fastest we've ever developed a vaccine has been like 7 years or
Yeah, probably unless we go back mid-century when things were loose and fast.
Right, but there's a reason for that. It's not just that, okay, well, we didn't have the technology, we have better technology now. We still need to be able to see what the long-term effects is on a 12-year-old.
Fast forward time. And in fact, usually you use animal models to do that, and the assumptions on which the animal models bring these things to light are faulty.
Right, and how do you judge the effect on a 12-year-old?
What the animal models give us is a signal that alerts us to things that we need to follow up on carefully in humans.
Yes. Okay. So hold on. So just to make this segment clear, okay, we've got very alarming short-term stuff. We've got short-term stuff that is alarming on the basis of where we find these lipids, where we find the spike proteins. Those things are reasons for concern because it wasn't supposed to be this way. We've also got an alarming signal in terms of the hazards and deaths, or the harms and the deaths that are reported in the system. And there's a reason to think that those are dramatic underreports.
Yes, and they're all consistent with this biodistribution.
That's two parts of the harm equation. Okay, the harm equation involves, there appears to be short-term harm being done at an alarming level. Long-term harm is quite plausible based on what we already know about what's taking place, but we of course are going to take time to figure out whether it's actually
find out, and then it's going to be too late. You can never you can vaccinate yourself, but you can never unvaccinate.
All right. The second video deals mostly with the ethical standards of the science community and their calls for the government to be more transparent and let people know what's really going on. And that whole thing is what they talk about in the second video more. And it's part of a great big long video. If you want to look it up, you can find it online. Great big long video where they just, they delve into the whole thing. So in our extreme wisdom of having taken biology in our freshman year in high school, and all the impartation of wisdom that came with that, we will probably, if we have any fear or we have any apprehension, we're probably going to sit here and say, I don't believe them, based on all our wisdom, or based on CNN, or whomever. I caution against that. Can I say what it is? It's stupid thinking. These people are educated far beyond anything we will ever dream of. If they are half right, we've got some huge problems coming in the future directly tied to this vaccine. That is all being covered up at this point. Now, I'm not going to go political or whatever. That's not my point this morning. My point this morning is to the best of their vocabulary and knowledge in Psalms 91 and Jesus in Luke 21 and Matthew 24, they warn us plagues and pestilences will be coming. They couldn't describe a shot. They couldn't describe an injection. They couldn't describe any of that stuff because it wasn't back there. So they could only use what was available to them. And again, I don't want to scare anybody, but if you follow some of these educated people, I'm not talking about Joe Blow who's got a mic setting in front of him and he's FaceTime live, and he's giving his opinion. I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about the scientists. I'm talking about the virologists, the doctors, the people who know. I'm talking about them. If they're half right, there's going to be huge fallout from this vaccine. But yet Jesus' word in Luke 21 is still true. If you will stand firm in the middle of all hell breaking loose around you, if you and I will stand firm, not a hair of our head will be hurt. Who makes that choice? We do. We determine how we're going to stand firm in this, how much we're going to stand firm, what we're going to do this. But if they're half right, folks, if you got the shot, you need to get ready for that. Because there could be a potential time bomb floating through you. And again, I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to wake you up and say, you need to get your faith suit on and get in front of this thing. Because God can save you and deliver you from it, but he's not going to do it without you getting involved and getting your faith rolling. So let's look at that one. There's number 3, future COVID variants and other possible releases. We don't know for sure this was released, but again, there's enough information out there to make you go, yeah, I'm pretty sure this is a man-made deal. We'll just leave it at that. Future variants of COVID and or new stuff that's going to come down the pike. You say, what makes you think new stuff is going to come down the pike? Could you give me the next article? Again, all we need really is the headline. U.S. COVID camps, training begins for the isolation and quarantine of a large portion of a local rural population. Can you slide this to the left just a bit so we can get a date there? It's over on the left side beside that picture. There's a date. If you can slide the whole thing. It was published July 14th. This last week, they published that. Why would you need to have training camps to isolate large portions of the rural population? Because it was the rural people saying, we ain't getting this shot, by and large. And number 2, well, this isn't going to happen again. Really? They're preparing for something that's never going to happen again? Okay, go to the next article. USSA News, DHS, Department of Homeland Security training course. Prepare for mass public quarantine of unvaccinated rural Americans, July 14th, 2021. This is coming again. They're going to do this again. We need to get our faith ready for that. We can't go into this as weakling Christians. Thank you for one amen. So let's go to, give me the next slide, the thing that Tom Scarella brought up last week, and I can't go through his whole, he had a dream, the Lord warned him in a dream that they were going to release mosquitoes in Florida under the pretense of controlling some kind of disease, genetically modified mosquitoes, under the pretense of controlling some kind of disease. He said, but in fact, they're carriers of something that long-term was going to be used for depopulation. And then he talked about that story a bit and talked to some of his friends who are kind of in the know of the whole thing. And they said, well, that's funny that you had that dream. And he's very accurate. I asked him, I said, because he told me on Saturday, he said, I'm thinking of sharing this, should I? I said, We don't hold anything back here. We're not the ostrich with our head in the sand going, I hope it goes away, hope it goes away. I don't see anything, I hope it goes away. No, we want to know what we're facing so we can focus our faith and go after it. I said, share it. I said, but let me ask you this question. Are you confident in your dreams? He said, oh, I know for a fact this was God. And he shared some other dreams he had that were just like it. So then he shared with his friends, and the lady kind of laughed and pulled up some things. So give me the next article. Pulled up some things. She said they've already done that. The mosquito thing. Let's see if there's a heading there. First ever U.S. release of genetically modified mosquitoes begins in the Florida Keys, April 30th this year. He knew nothing about this. Now, if you read the article, it all sounds good. They're trying to get in front of, I think malaria is one and something else because so many people in the United States are dying from it. I mean, just that statement was sarcasm. We don't have a huge population of people dying from it in the United States. Okay? Give me the next article, if you would, please. Genetically modified mosquitoes to be released in Florida after years of planning. The effort is aimed at combating whatever that is, mosquitoes which spread viruses such as dengue, not sure how to pronounce it, Zika, and yellow fever. And there's another article, I don't have it here, but there's another article where they're contemplating doing this nationwide. Because in Minnesota, we have so many people dying of Zika and yellow fever. See, now, if Tom heard correctly, it isn't about Zika, yellow fever, and that other one, dengue. It's not about that. It's about depopulation, is what God told him. And he said, this is going to be spread haphazard by mosquitoes. So what do we need to do? Plague, pestilence? We need to get ready. We need to get our faith turned on that, nope, not going to happen. The fifth one there was worldwide population reduction. I'm not really going to get into that. If you've done any research at all, Bill Gates openly talks about it. And he's one of the big hitters in this whole thing. He's not hiding it. We've got too many people. The earth can't sustain it. We've got to reduce population and blah, blah, blah. And he talks about doing it through vaccines. And so that's not a secret. If you're following anything at all, that one is obvious. But I have brought that up. And, there's going to be things that are going to be depopulation things. And I've had Christians say this. Well, Pastor, if they're going to do that, why don't we just let them go? Let's just die and go home. We'll be in heaven. I agree, it's tempting. But my question is this. Because the thought is, why should we stay alive? If they're trying to depopulate the world, let them take us out and we'll go home. Well, my question is this. Why are you and I alive right now? We have a purpose. We're supposed to be accomplishing something. That purpose isn't going to go away just because they want us to go away. If anybody's going to be needed when things get ugly, it's going to be a strong, powerful, influential Christian church. Not the weakling ones where we're shut down with the rest of the world because we're afraid we're going to catch this thing and it'll kill us. The world doesn't need that Christian church. The world needs the one who says, I'm ready for this, and I can teach you how to be ready for this, and I plan to go through it, and not a hair of my head is going to be harmed. That's the one they're going to be looking to and needing, because that'll be harvest time. You talk about get people saved. But if we're all cowering in the corner with them, we've got nothing to give them. And here's the last one that he had. I had it this way on my notes, just aggravating stuff like free speech infringement. So this I'm just throwing in as a bonus this morning. Go to the next article if you would. I've got 2 more articles and then all that is done. There's the mosquito one. Democratic groups plan to fact-check private SMS messages. Do you realize that's one of the proposals now? Your texts will be monitored. You know, surprise, surprise, they are already. Your emails are monitored. Everything is monitored. It's all stored. What they're wanting to do is get the right to counter misinformation about vaccines. See that line there above the picture of the guy? So what they're wanting to do is track us, and if we text anybody or email anybody about something they consider to be misinformation, you lose the ability to text. Like they take Twitter away, they take Facebook away, they take all the platforms away. They will take your ability to text away because you've been naughty. You used your free speech guaranteed by the Constitution, and now we're going to have to slap your hands. See, they don't want the truth. They want their version of the truth. Give me the next one. This is kind of interesting. White House says, slide it up. There's the lady that talks to us all the time. You saw her picture. Can you slide that up so everybody sees? You see her on TV all the time. Okay, she's speaking for the president in the White House, blah, blah, blah. Okay? She is talking about deplatforming American citizens. A platform is like Facebook, Twitter. Those are called platforms, and people put information out there. So to deplatform you and I, an American citizen, you shouldn't be banned from one platform, like texting, and not others if you are providing misinformation out there. So if they catch you texting about the COVID vaccine, and they claim that's misinformation, their theory, the White House theory is, we will take all your communication, digital communication ability away. We'll shut you up. See now, President Trump, former President Trump, just sued Twitter and some of these because the reason they kicked him off is they said he was putting misinformation out there. He sued him on the basis of the First Amendment rights. He's trying to get something moving to hold the digital companies accountable so they can't just at whim say, we don't like what you're doing, and just silence you. But you know what? That's the only way this is going to be stopped in this country. It's got to go to court. And hopefully it goes to the right courts where we win. Because in reality, I should be able to say anything I want to say. Right, wrong, stupid, smart, whatever. It's called free speech. Now, granted, if you dish it out, you got to be able to take it. Because they've got free speech too. That's the basis of what this country is built on. So what do we have to do? Is your faith strong and ready for some of this stuff? Do you even know how to pray authoritatively? Because if we don't, that's not a put down. It's not a bad thing. It's time to learn. Yeah. All I'm saying is, here's where we're at. And in the last days or the end times, there's going to be some awesome, awesome things going on in God's kingdom, and miracles and signs and wonders and people getting saved. There's going to be an awesome move of the Spirit. But alongside of that is going to be horrible things. We have to be able to withstand the horrible things so we can walk in the good things. Now is the time to get ready for that. Not, well, we'll deal with that when it comes. Then it's too late. Faith doesn't grow like that. It takes time. You have to secure yourself in it. You have to get knowledge. You have to get rhema word. You got to get revelation. It has to become a knowing, a substance, King James says, inside you. It doesn't happen overnight. So we need to actually, this is the whole point of my message this morning. We need to actually get facing the reality of, and I won't even say this stuff is absolutely going on. I'm going to say if what these scientists are talking about is kind of going on. We need to get ready for it. Because the Bible warned us plagues and pestilences are coming. Jesus also said they don't have to touch you. But you have to stand firm. Now, one of the things that you can't stand firm on is something you don't know anything about. So I'm totally against the approach the church has been, not Word of Life Church, the church in general in America. I'm totally against the approach of just ignore it, we'll pray it goes away. There's still churches shut down. They won't meet in the building. They meet outside. Because they don't want to catch COVID. When the time comes where push goes to shove, and something serious where maybe 10, 20, 30% of the world's population is dying, not 1%. We're talking a real deal. That church is useless. That Christian is useless. When someone turns to us and says, I need help, I need an answer, what do I do? We have got to give them something of substance that they can apply and walk through it. Even though 1,000 fall at one side and 10,000 at your right hand, it will not come nigh you or touch you. We are responsible for culturing and fostering that. We can't stay weak Christians, folks. We just can't stay weak Christians. Because we'll get run over like a steamroller. Where's God? Same place he was before you got run over by the steamroller. Waiting for you to step up into your authority. Use what's given to you. So there's the whole point of my message this morning that I've been hedging on talking about. Because number one, I don't want to scare anybody. If you got your vaccine, well, you got it. Like the one guy said, you can't be unvaccinated. You got it. Okay? So now you got to take that and deal with it from here forward. And the absolute thing I want you to remember is not the French virologist who says you'll be dead in 2 years. That's not my point this morning. If you got vaccinated, my point this morning is by faith, the promises are there. This thing does not have to go bad inside of you. In fact, God can actually, all things are possible to them that believe. God can actually, I know this is really big for God, but he could actually go in and wipe your system clean of that vaccine. Ooh. You know, we think so small about our God. And we'll say, oh, God, you are Lord of heaven and earth. Nothing is impossible for you except this COVID vaccine's killing me, and I don't know what to do about it. Weak. Pitiful. We're designed and created for way better than that. Heaven and earth is supposed to bow at our words. We've been studying that. Heaven and earth is supposed to bow at our words. And any little blip in the road, especially if it was like, I didn't realize what I did, now I did it. Repent, ask forgiveness, deal with it. It's like anything else. Deal with it. That's the point of the message. The point is, no matter what's coming, God expects us to live above it. That's our goal. And, you know, there'll be varying degrees of that. But our goal is, I'm not going down with the boat. I'm going to live above this thing. So I just took some of our current events and what's going on right now and said, folks, when we're talking about having authority in prayer, let's apply it right now to some of this stuff. apply it right now. For you, your family, apply it right now. Because this is a good training exercise for what's coming down the road. You say, you don't know for a fact it's coming. Then why is the government already training for the next isolation?
Yep.
It's coming.
Yep.
It's coming. Don't know how that's going to look, but it's coming. They wouldn't be training for it. They're already trying to figure out a way how to control you.
Yep.
You rebellious renegades.
That's right.
That's basically what they're saying in street language. We're going to quarantine you, we're going to isolate you, and we're going to figure out how to do it. No more of this stuff of I ain't submitting to this. I ain't wearing a mask. No more of that. We're going to force you. Why would they go through all that hassle if they don't have another event they think is coming on the horizon?
Yep.
So we need to get ready. Because maybe in the physical they can force quarantine us, but they can't force me to get their disease. Whatever the next one is, you can't force me to catch it. You might make me stay at home, look out the window, but you can't force me to catch it. Does that make sense? I determine that. So, Lord, this morning I'm praying that we're not made fearful. This isn't something that causes us worry or anxiety, but what we talked about this morning, this is something to focus us into the reality of the times we're living in and the fact that greater is he that is in us than anything out in this world. And we need to become so firmly established in that no matter what comes in these last days, we will not be here struggling, half dead, sickly, while the glory is moving on this earth around us, and we can't even participate with it because we're struggling to stay alive. We will be the people who will walk this out in health, strength, life, and be the resource to others as you move by your Spirit. That's where we're going. That's what we're preparing for. In Jesus' name. Amen.